London, a city that never sleeps, where the lights of the skyline twinkle like stars and the streets are always alive with the hum of activity. A city of vibrant life and bustling crowds. From the early morning rush to the late-night revellers, London pulses with energy and diversity. Yet beneath the surface, a darkness stirred. In the shadows of its alleyways and the fog of its streets, an unseen menace lurked, waiting to strike. A terror that clung to the city's arteries. The vast network of railways that snaked through its heart. These tracks, once symbols of progress and connection, became pathways of fear. This is the chilling tale of John Duffy and David Mulcahy, the railway butchers, who transformed the city's lifeline into a hunting ground. Their names would become synonymous with dread. They preyed on the innocent, their depravity casting a long, dark shadow over London. Their victims, chosen at random, were left to face unimaginable horrors. The years 1985 and 1986 marked a period of escalating fear. As the calendar pages turned, the sense of unease grew, gripping the city in a vice of terror. The whispers started subtly, spreading like a virus through the crowded carriages and echoing in the cavernous train stations. Women weren't safe. The fear was palpable, a constant companion on every journey. The very act of boarding a train became a gamble with fate. Each step onto the platform was fraught with anxiety, each journey a test of courage. Their crimes, as brutal as they were brazen, sent shivers down the spines of a nation, leaving an indelible mark on Britain's criminal history. The headlines screamed of horror, and the public recoiled in fear. Their reign of terror began in the shadows, their crimes escalating with each passing month. The city watched in helpless dread as the darkness grew. The once familiar clatter of train wheels against tracks became a chilling reminder of their lurking presence. Each sound, each vibration, a signal that the railway butchers were near. The railway butchers were out there and no one was safe. The city of London, with all its vibrancy and life, was under siege from within, its heart gripped by an unrelenting terror. John Duffy and David Mulcahy. Two names that would become synonymous with terror. Their very mention sending shivers down the spines of those who knew their story. Their paths, seemingly ordinary, converged in the shadows, their dark desires intertwining to form a deadly bond. It was in the dimly lit alleys and the forgotten corners of the city that their sinister partnership took root. Their friendship, forged in the fires of shared darkness, would have devastating consequences. They fed off each other's twisted desires, their bond strengthening with each act of violence. The city, unaware of the storm brewing in its underbelly, continued its daily grind, oblivious to the predators lurking in its midst. It's a chilling reminder that monsters often hide in plain sight, their true natures masked behind seemingly normal facades. Duffy, born in 1959, was a troubled soul from a young age. His childhood, marred by instability and neglect, sowed the seeds of his future monstrosity. Prone to bouts of anger and violence, his early life hinted at the darkness that festered within. He was a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment or perhaps the wrong company to detonate. His encounters with authority were frequent, each one a testament to his growing instability. Mulcahy, born in 1960, was Duffy's shadow, his accomplice in depravity. Described as quiet and unassuming, he possessed a hidden rage that found its outlet in the most horrific ways. His calm exterior belied the storm that raged within, a storm that would soon find a destructive path. Together, they became the embodiment of human cruelty, their names forever etched in the annals of criminal history. The railway lines became their playground, the city their hunting ground. Under the cover of darkness, they prowled the streets, their eyes scanning for the next victim. Their reign of terror was marked by a series of brutal attacks, each more heinous than the last. The city, once a place of safety and comfort, became a landscape of fear and suspicion. People whispered their names in hushed tones, the horror of their deeds casting a long shadow over the community. The bond between Duffy and Mulcahy was not just one of friendship, but of shared malevolence. They understood each other in ways that no one else could, their dark desires creating a connection that was both profound and terrifying. Their partnership was a dance of death, each step choreographed with chilling precision. As their crimes escalated, so did the fear that gripped the city. The authorities, initially baffled by the seemingly random acts of violence, soon realized they were dealing with a pair of predators unlike any they had encountered before. The hunt for Duffy and Mulcahy became a race against time, a desperate bid to stop the monsters before they could strike again. Their eventual capture brought a sense of relief, but the scars they left behind would take much longer to heal. The story of John Duffy and David Mulcahy is a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human soul and the devastating impact it can have when unleashed upon the world. They fed off each other's twisted desires, their bond strengthening with each act of violence. The railway lines became their playground, the city their hunting ground. Under the cover of darkness, they prowled the streets, their eyes scanning for the next victim. The railway lines became their playground, the city their hunting ground. Under the cover of darkness, they prowled the streets, their eyes scanning for the next victim. Their reign of terror was marked by a series of brutal attacks, each more heinous than the last. The city, once a place of safety and comfort, became a landscape of fear and suspicion. People whispered their names in hushed tones, the horror of their deeds casting a long shadow over the community. The railway butchers were meticulous in their planning, their methods reflecting a chillingly calculated approach to their heinous acts. They stalked their victims like predators, their eyes scanning the crowds, searching for the perfect prey to satisfy their dark desires. They favoured the anonymity of the railway system, a network that allowed them to move unseen, to blend in with the throngs of commuters. Their preferred hunting ground was the desolate stretches of track between stations. It was here, in the echoing silence, that they could operate with impunity, their victims isolated and vulnerable. The darkness became their ally, cloaking their movements and amplifying the terror they inflicted. They would often pose as police officers, using fake badges and uniforms to gain their victims' trust. This ruse, as chilling as it was effective, allowed them to control their victims, to lead them willingly into their carefully laid traps. The fear they instilled was palpable, their victims paralyzed by a terror that would linger long after the ordeal was over. The first murder, attributed to the railway butchers, sent shockwaves through London. It was a crime so heinous, so unexpected, that it left the entire city reeling. The brutality of the act was a stark reminder that even in a bustling metropolis, danger could be lurking just around the corner, waiting to strike when least expected. It was a stark reminder that evil lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim its victims. The fear was palpable, spreading like wildfire through the streets of London. People began to look over their shoulders, wary of every shadow, every unfamiliar face. The sense of security that once blanketed the city was now shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. The victim, a young woman named Alison Day, was found brutally murdered near a railway line in Hackney Wick on the 28th of December, 1985. Alison was just 24 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. She had dreams, aspirations, and a family who loved her dearly. Her untimely death was not just a loss to her family, but to the entire community. Her death, as brutal as it was senseless, marked the beginning of a reign of terror that would grip the city for months to come. Vigils were held, tears were shed, and the community came together in mourning. But beneath the sorrow, there was a growing anger, a demand for justice that echoed through the streets. As weeks turned into months, the body count rose. Each new victim was a grim reminder of the evil that still roamed free. The police were under immense pressure to catch the perpetrators, but the killers seemed to always be one step ahead, eluding capture and leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Each victim, snatched from the relative safety of their lives, added to the growing sense of panic that gripped the city. The randomness of the attacks made everyone a potential target. The fear was no longer confined to the night. It seeped into the daylight hours, affecting the daily lives of Londoners. The victims were all young women, their lives cut tragically short by the depravity of two individuals. These women had families, friends, and futures that were cruelly stolen from them. The community was left to grapple with the senselessness of it all, trying to find meaning in the midst of such horror. Their modus operandi was chilling in its consistency. The killers had a pattern, a method to their madness that made them all the more terrifying. They knew the railway lines well, using them as their hunting grounds, and their familiarity with these areas allowed them to strike with precision and disappear without a trace. The victims were often abducted late at night, taken to secluded areas along the railway lines, and subjected to unimaginable horrors before being brutally murdered. The sheer brutality of their actions was beyond comprehension, leaving the city in a state of shock and disbelief. The brutality of the crimes, the sheer savagery inflicted upon their victims, shocked even the most hardened investigators. These were seasoned professionals, individuals who had seen the worst humanity had to offer, yet even they were taken aback by the level of violence and cruelty displayed by the railway butchers. The city held its breath, united in fear and desperate for answers. The media coverage was relentless, with headlines screaming of the latest atrocities and the public demanding action. London was a city on edge, its people bound together by a shared sense of vulnerability and a desperate hope that the nightmare would soon come to an end.